thee, O God, for the Son of thy love, for Jesus to thy head is now gone above. Hallelujah, thine glory, hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine glory, revive us again, revive us again, fill each heart with thy love, may each soul be rekindled with fire from above. Hallelujah, thine glory, hallelujah, amen. Hallelujah, thine glory, revive us again.
I've been reading a book. I actually started like in May, but I'm a very slow reader, so I'm still in the middle of it. But I've been reading a book called The Baseball 100, and it's about the 100 greatest baseball players of all time. And the last player that the author included in the list was a player by the name of Roberto Alomar. And Roberto is a great player, but in the last paragraph talking about Roberto Alomar, he explained why he included Roberto Alomar in the list and not the player who just missed the list, Barry Larkin. You see, these two players had almost identical stats. It'd be hard to find two players who had more identical stats. But you see, Roberto Alomar played more years than Barry Larkin and also was hardly ever injured, so he played all the time. And the last line that the author used, he said, one of the most underrated talents in life and in baseball is the talent of just showing up. And that's what I want to ask everyone in this audience tonight. Do you have that talent? We know you have the talent, but do you use that talent? Just showing up. Are you reliable? Are you consistent? Are you here when you need to be? Are you there for people who need you when they need a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen to them? That's always been one of my pet peeves, is people that are flaky. Just because you can always find a reason to not be there. You can always find a reason to not do. Are you a reliable human being? Are you consistent? Do you show up? There are two verses that Paul uses. Paul wrote both of these verses, and they're almost identical in what they say. 1 Corinthians 12:26, if one member suffers, all suffer together. If one member is honored, all rejoice together. And then Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. You know what that tells me? Be there, no matter what. In good times and bad, in sickness and in health. Be there. Just show up. Be consistent. Be reliable. Not everyone in the world has the ability to preach. Not everyone has the ability to teach. Not everyone has the ability to lead singing or to cook a great meal for a bunch of people. But every single person in this room has the ability to just show up. So that's what I want you to ask yourself that tonight. Are you reliable? Are you consistent? Do you show up? If not, I hope we can get that figured out. As I said Sunday, we know that the invitation is always open, no matter what the time is, but the invitation is open right now. Whatever your need is, I hope you'll come as we stand and sing.
I wander far away from God, now I'm coming home. The paths of sin too long I've trod, Lord, I'm coming home, coming home, coming home, never more to roam. Open wide thine arms of love, Lord, I'm coming home.
Someone would, as we get started here, if you'll look up 2 Corinthians 13:5 and be ready to read that in just a second. Mark asked me to teach tonight, and I always, I don't mind teaching, but I hate when somebody asks me to teach and doesn't give me a topic. They just say, oh, whatever you want to. But in this case, I'm kind of glad Because I did ask him, and I was so glad he said, well, whatever you want. And I said, well, I was afraid you was going to say Acts, and I don't even want to try to keep up with what he's been doing in the book of Acts. So we're going to do something totally unrelated tonight, and I hope it's beneficial to you. But we'll get on into it. Y'all remember school, right? Mr. Bobby, you remember being in school? Vaguely? Yeah. Me too. It gets vaguer and vaguer all the time. There were some good things about school, right? Hang out with your friends, get into mischief. I don't know if y'all did that or not. I did all the time. And then, of course, you had to go to class occasionally. And then there were some bad things about school, right? Boring teachers, having to do homework, having to go to class. Uh, 2 Corinthians 13:5. Did y'all ever have one of those classes where the teacher was awful? You know, I had one that Miss Massey was her name, Judy Massey. She was my geometry and algebra teacher. And you know, that woman actually thought that we needed to know how to solve for x, and that the Pythagorean theorem was going to be of some use to us at some point in life. I was convinced back then it wasn't. Unfortunately, I learned better, as most of us probably did, if you recall that stuff. But it turns out she was actually, I couldn't stand her at the time, she was actually one of the best teachers I ever had, because she expected something of us. And she pushed us a little bit to do the things we were supposed to be doing. But did you ever have a teacher use those 6 most feared words that said, all right, y'all aren't listening, y'all aren't paying attention today, take out a sheet of paper. You know what's coming, right? Pop test. Well, guess what? Take out a sheet of paper. We're going to do a pop test tonight. And it's not really a pop test. If you want to take out a sheet of paper and kind of keep score here, it might be beneficial. But Lamentations chapter 3, verse 40 says, let us test and examine our ways and return to the Lord. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Did you have 2 Corinthians 13:5? Would you read that for us, please?
Examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Test yourselves, for do not realize, or you do not realize this about yourselves, that Jesus Christ is with you. Unless indeed you fail to meet the test.
Okay. I looked at New King James and New American Standard, and the wording is almost identical in those two translations for the most part, till you get to the latter part of it. Except for in the beginning part, they do something I thought was kind of interesting. New King James starts out with examine yourselves, and then says test yourselves. And then New American Standard starts out test yourselves, and then says examine yourselves. And I kind of went mark on it for just a minute there. I had to look up the Greek words to see if they happened to be the same Greek words, which they weren't. But apparently they're very similar because the definitions were almost identical in English. They mean test, examine, check yourself out, see if you're meeting up to the standard. So we're going to do what Paul said there, and we're going to examine ourselves. Now I got most of the material for this actually came from a book that has no religious interest whatsoever in it. It was a book about boards. As most of y'all know, I work at Indian Creek, and I am a board member there. So several years ago, I was reading this book about how boards can be effective. You know, how do you operate as an organism to reach the goal that you're trying to reach? So I was reading this particular book, and it had this section in it called "How to Best Serve the Organization." It's a self-examination for a board member to look at it and see, are you doing what you need to be doing? Or should you maybe get off this board and do something else? Well, as I was reading the things, I thought, this applies to being a Christian too. Most of these ideas here. So we're going to go through those tonight. So as we go through them, and hopefully we'll get through all of them. There's several here, but and we won't spend a lot of time on some of them because some of them have, I think, better applications than others. But as we go through them, score yourself between 0 being the worst and 5 being the best, and then we'll total it up at the end and kind of see where we fall out on this. So the first thing was what Kelly was talking about just a minute ago. Showing up, board attendance. Are you there? You know, if you're not there, you can't be a part of what's going on. You can't help with the decision making. But part of being on a board is being there to have an influence, to share your wisdom, your insight on different things. Because like most boards, our board at the camp, there's a wide variety of people on there. A lot of different backgrounds. There's preachers. There's people that have real jobs and those kind of things too. And there's a mix there. So we get a lot of different viewpoints. Well, same thing with being a Christian. Are you showing up? Like Kelly said tonight, are you showing up? And the note in this was if you got anything less than 70%, it's a 2 at best. But we sometimes might say or might have heard somebody say, but you don't have to go on Wednesday night to go to heaven. Or you don't have to go on Sunday night to go to heaven. Or maybe something like, well, I'm living good enough. God knows I love Him. I don't have to be there all the time, right? Well, I'm tired. We have jobs, right? We have life. Life ever catch up? You got kids? It's going to catch you sooner or later if you got kids. Something's going to happen that's going to get you out of your normal routine, and you're going to get tired. You ever been tired on Wednesday night? Sunday night? Sunday morning? Don't we know we're supposed to be here, though? I mean, if we're really honest about it. If the elders have set a time for us to meet, we're supposed to be there. We're supposed to submit to our elders, right? As leaders, as shepherds. So if they set a time for us to be somewhere, and I know I'm, so to speak, preaching to the choir because it is Wednesday night and you're here. The ones that really need to hear some of this kind of stuff are not here. But yeah, if they set a time, we're supposed to be here. But I was thinking about, when I was going over this, refreshing this in my mind today, I was just thinking, this pandemic stuff that we just got through, I think it's one of the worst things that's ever happened to the church. Because whether we meant to or not, and I'm not saying we did the wrong thing necessarily, that's arguable, but whether we meant to or not, what we taught people during the pandemic was it really don't matter if you're here or not. Because we're still having trouble getting some folks back, aren't we? You know why? You don't have to be here. There's a good reason somewhere or somehow you can come up with a good reason not to be here. And I'm afraid that's what we taught a lot of people. Now not rightly so. That's the wrong interpretation of what we did, when we weren't meeting because of the pandemic. But that's the lesson that was taught. So, attendance is necessary. Well, why should we attend? And just as a side note here, we're not talking about being missing because of work or because you're sick or, those kind of things are outside of what we're talking about tonight. If you're healthy and you're able to be here, we should be here. But the fact is that attendance is probably not the real problem anyway. If a person's having a problem missing, it's deeper than that, isn't it? It's a heart problem. Somebody get Hebrews 10, 26 and 27. Oh, by the way, y'all going to have to participate tonight because I don't like listening to myself talk. I'd rather listen to y'all a little bit. And it'll save my voice. Who's got Hebrews 10, 26 and 27?
For the Lord said literally, we have received knowledge of the truth that there no longer remains a sacrifice of sins, but a certain fearful expectation of judgment and fiery indignation, which will devour the adversary. Okay,
the writer there is warning us of willfully sinning, right? We make a choice to do something we know we're not supposed to do. What's the verse just prior to this teach us? What do we typically use it to teach? Hebrews 10, 25. Come on. Y'all are Church of Christers, right? What does Hebrews 10, 25 teach us? To be together. We know the time to assemble is coming up. We're supposed to be encouraging one another to be ready to be assembled, right? So if we willfully choose sin, to do something we know we're not supposed to do, we're in trouble. Basically, is what those two verses say, right? Attendance. The context of the chapter demands that applies to attendance as well. What if we're having trouble dealing with somebody in the congregation? Could that be a discouragement? And I meant to say this before we get started. Some of this stuff I need to make better application to myself, so I'm not just talking to y'all, I'm talking to myself too. But what if we're having trouble dealing with somebody? Is that a good enough reason not to show up? Do what? It's your brother, isn't it? Now, do we have to like everybody? No. I mean, it's unrealistic to expect that. I might not like you, but I got to love you. I got to care about your well-being. Doesn't mean I got to sit around with you all day and all night, hanging out together. That's not what God expects of us. But He does expect us to be there for one another if we're having trouble, right? So if we're having trouble dealing with somebody, we need to address it first of all and fix it. And it may be, it may be the conclusion we come to. Alan and I, we just cannot get along. He's going to sit on this side, and I'm going to sit on this side. And we're going to be fine. We'll be kind to each other when we speak and meet each other in the middle here, and we'll go on and do our thing. That's okay. It's not a reason not to be around. I don't know if y'all have noticed, I put this note in here to remind myself too. I drive a bus too, and of course work at the camp, so I love kids. You'd probably guess that, right? But I have a hard time with grown-ups, y'all. Some of y'all are hard to deal with. we sometimes people ask me at camp, what's the biggest trouble you have? What's the hardest thing to deal with camp? And before I would have thought was the kids. Keeping the kids out of trouble and keeping them, all herded, all them cats herded in the right direction and that kind of thing. That's easy. That is easy. It's the adults that are hard to deal with because they can be so unreasonable sometimes. We can be so unreasonable sometimes and forget to act like we're supposed to be acting. Let's see. I won't harp on this one point all night because I got about 50 more to get through. No, not really, y'all. Okay, we'll just wrap this up. Bottom line is we're supposed to be here when the brethren meet. We need to be here, unless there's a legit reason for that. And we're adults. We ought to be able to figure that out. So number one was attendance. Are you here? As Kelly said, are you showing up? And we'll just go with 70%. If you're here 70% of the time, you can give yourself a 2, maybe a 3. All right, number 2. When you show up, do you participate? This one said participate at meetings. If you participate fully, but don't dominate the conversation of the class time, give yourself a 5. So, when you're here, are you participating? Are you singing? When we sing, it's not just to God that we're singing, right? Somebody get Colossians 3:16, and then somebody else get Ephesians 5:19. It's not just to God that we're singing. There's also other reasons behind that. So if I'm not singing, I'm hampering you. Assuming you were, bless your heart, assuming you're close enough to hear me singing, you should be getting something from it. Who's got Colossians 3:16?
Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs with thankfulness in your hearts to God.
Ephesians 5:19. Who's got that?
Speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your hearts to God.
You see that? 2 things there, right? We're singing to the Lord. That's the second one, as listed in that last passage there. But the first one is we're singing to each other. It's a teaching moment. All of us aren't, and I'm not saying I am either, all of us aren't qualified to stand up and teach a class or to preach a sermon. But we can sing on some level, okay? You notice one thing it says about it, does it say sing good? Does it say sing in tune? Does it say sing in the proper time or the proper key? It doesn't say any of those things, does it? I think sometimes, and I come from a background outside of the church, And my family, particularly my dad's side of the family, very musical. They played instruments. I don't even know how many different instruments that my dad could play. But I mean, he went so far as to even make his own guitars and fiddles and stuff. Instruments were a big deal. I kind of see a little bit of wisdom, and don't take this the wrong way, I don't mean this in a bad way, but God's wisdom shows in this passage, doesn't it? Where he leaves out instruments. Because we're all supposed to do this. We're all supposed to sing. You play piano? Play piano? You can. You play piano? Play banjo? Play guitar? Play drums? That's right. He don't care whether you play the drums or the piano or the guitar or pick your instrument. He wants you to sing. He picks something that pretty much everybody can do. Now I know there's some that are physically not capable of singing, but you can still make the melody in your heart, even in those situations. Isn't that kind of cool? I always thought that was kind of neat that, that you can see. I love it when I read a passage and I can see it just clicks. I bet that's why he did that. It's just kind of cool. Okay, so singing. When you're here and we're together, are you singing? What about praying? Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 5:17 to pray without ceasing. And we know we pray during our meeting times. Are you praying? Are you listening to the guy that's leading the prayer? Praying along with him? Or praying your own thing while he's praying? Are you listening? I know listening doesn't take a lot. Well, sometimes it takes a lot of effort. Depends on whether you're listening to me or somebody like me. But are you listening and making an application to yourself? It's okay to come to worship for what you need. You ever feel like that? Feel like, man, I just got to be there today. I've got to get my mind off of all this stuff. I need to be there. I know sometimes we talk about people will complain about, well, I just don't get anything out of the lessons. I don't get anything out of the sermons. I don't get anything out of being there. Well, maybe. But there's sometimes when you need to get something out of the things, out of the lessons and the sermons. Not just put in. But are you listening? Are you making application to it? Are you reading? In class times like now. You looking up verses? Thank you to y'all who've done that and will do that tonight. If you're not, why not? Why not? Are you afraid you're going to misread something? Or mislead somebody maybe because you misread it? So what? If you misread it, one of us will say something, correct it. Probably. Participate. Answering questions, asking questions. Somebody get Proverbs 27:17. Part of participating, part of communication. I prefer, if I was able to choose what we did when we gathered, I would prefer that we do like we're doing tonight. And we had class time and interacted with each other. How many teachers we got here? Any teachers? Do you like it when did you or do you like it when your students give you feedback? It helps, doesn't it? You kind of know if you're going in the right direction, if you're getting through, if you're making it understandable. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to answer questions, right? If you understand the question. Who's got Proverbs 27:17? Somebody got it. Do I need to start at the point up?
Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another.
Iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another. It's one of my favorite passages. The whole idea there is that there's working together. Almost in a sense, friction, right? If you're going to sharpen a knife or an axe or some piece of metal, you've got to have some friction there or you can't sharpen it. This is our time. Times like this tonight. Sunday morning classes. Any other time that we get together to study. That's our time to sharpen each other. If there's some friction, it's a good thing, okay? As long as we got the right attitude about it. If we're causing friction just for the sake of friction, I confess I cannot sharpen a knife with a stone. I just can't do it. My dad could sharpen one. He could take your pocket knife right now if you've been dragging it in the parking lot, and he could sharpen it so that you could shave with it within 5 minutes. Man, you couldn't cut butter with one after I get done with it. I just can't do it. But it still takes that friction to get that sharpening. If you do it right, with the right attitude, it has an effect. It has a positive effect. Okay, so show up, attend, participate when you're there. That was number 2. Number 3 was understand, a good board member understands the responsibility of board membership. So I think I took this as in the Christian point of view, is do I take being a Christian seriously? Does it, me being a Christian, above everything else, impact how I live my life? When I make a decision, does my Christianity guide my thinking and the decision-making process? You know, what's our main responsibility as Christians? Anybody have a thought on that? Okay, serve God. Teach others. That's the one that came to mind for me. But you're right too. Serving God, and in serving God, we're to teach others, because we're commanded in Matthew 28, 19, 20, and other places too, to go teach the world, right? So with that in mind, if that's my job, that's my mission as a Christian, how far do I have to go? Jesus said go, right? How far? It's a legit question, right? If you tell me to go, where am I going? That's interesting. So can I go too far? I mean, physically, can I go too far? No. Anywhere in the world's game, right? Any long distance away from. Can I go too near? No. Where do we need to start? Right here. Right here, right? In our homes. Home is a mission field. I used to do, and I may have mentioned this, I don't recall the other times I taught here, but Freed Hardeman, I think it was, several years back, had done a study on young people in the church. And they found in that study, well, I just ask y'all, how many young people do you think we lose? From the time they graduate high school to the time that they would, finish trade school, graduate college. So that 18 to, took some of us longer than others, let's say 23. Okay. 30%? Who else? 80%? Oh, I'm getting this and that. Was higher than 30 and lower than 80, but not much lower. 75% is what they said. We lose 75% at this time, and I doubt it's changed for the good anyway since then. We lose 75% of our kids from the time they graduated high school to the time that they would get out of college in that age range. Now, some come back. A few. That's scary, yo. Somebody's not doing their job. I may not be doing my job. If we're losing that many of our kids, something is not right. Maybe we
It's going to get worse too with these woke colleges where they're going now.
With what now?
With the woke colleges where they are.
Oh, the woke colleges, yeah.
It's worse.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And the woke is getting to the high schools as well, and elementary schools even. I saw some stuff just the last couple of days about the curriculums and the books that are on reading lists and things in some of the elementary schools. As far as I know, it's not here in Walker County, or even in Alabama for that matter, and I hope it never gets here. But yeah, it's going to get worse because society's not getting better right now. That's not to say that it's worse than it's ever been. Y'all know, I've heard people say that before, and I probably have said it myself before. It's worse today than it's ever been. Anybody remember Noah? That's pretty bad. I don't think we've quite reached that level yet. So, yeah, but it is, I mean, society goes in ebbs and flows, up and down. It'll get worse, and then it's going to get better for a little while, and then it'll get worse again, until the world ends. So, okay, got off track a little bit. Okay, so the third one was understands the responsibility of being a board member. Fourth one, prepares for board meetings. When I show up for a board meeting, if I haven't read over the minutes from the last board meeting, I'm probably not ready. I don't know how other boards work. I'm on the one at the camp, and I do serve on a couple of others that are very inactive, so I guess technically I'm not really on any others besides the camp. But typically we have questions that will come up during the discussions that require some research, some legwork, outside of the board meetings. Like we talked about something at this last board meeting that, well, we didn't know the answer to. Nobody on the board knew the answer. So we said, well, Kelly's on our board now. I don't know if y'all knew that or not. He might not have wanted you to know it. I don't know. But, oops. Kelly, we need you to find out about this. So in November when we meet, we expect Kelly to have an answer for it. So he's got homework, right? Well, I almost always have homework because my job demands it. But if I haven't prepared for that board meeting, I'm not doing my job as a board member. I've not only let myself down, I've let the other board members down and the organization down at the same time. Same thing applies to here. Did you prepare for our meeting tonight? Now, I'll give you a pass on the studying part, okay? Now, maybe you assumed that Mark was going to be here tonight, so you read Acts, whatever chapter it is we're in. I lost it for a minute. 7? I think we're in 7. Is that right? I know we were stoning Stephen. 8. I guess we're in chapter 8 now. Somewhere along there. Anyway, did I read what I thought we were going to be studying? Well, I didn't tonight. I didn't read Acts because I knew we weren't studying Acts tonight. Did you? What about for your class Sunday morning? I know we'll be talking about Daniel in our class. What chapter, Mr. E? Mr. E? Uh-oh. 9. Okay. I couldn't remember what chapter he said. All right, we'll be studying chapter 9. So if I'm prepared for the meeting Sunday morning, I'm going to read Daniel chapter 9. And at least have some idea of what he's talking about, right? At least read it. Now, there's a lot more that could and should be done. Well, okay, since you didn't know tonight what we're going to be talking about, did you pray any before we came to class? Before you got here? When you got to the parking lot, did you sit in your car for just a second? Say a prayer? Bless this time we're going to be together? What about at home before you left? That's preparing. That counts. That's the kind of thing. The preparing is getting our minds ready for what we're about to do, right? Kind of getting in that mode. What about exercising? The next one is exercise good business judgment on behalf of the organization. And I put reputation for this one. Do we preserve the reputation of the church? As members of the church, do we preserve the reputation? How do our actions reflect on our brethren? We won't read it because I'm going to run out of time at the rate I'm going, but Matthew 5:13 through 15 is the salt and light passages. Salt and light. I don't know if there's anything in the universe that has more impact than those two things can have. Good and bad, right? A light that's too bright is bad, but a light that's bright enough is good. Too much salt? I think Michelle thinks that we can't have too much salt, but there's a right amount there. There's an influence to be had. That's what we're supposed to be as Christians. We're supposed to be an influence on the world around us for good, not for bad. All right, the next one was pays particular attention to the quality of what the organization does. Somebody get Colossians 3:17, please. And then hold your place right there because I've got 2 more verses after that. Colossians 3:17.
And whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God, the Father, through Him.
Okay. To me, that says quality, doesn't it? If Jesus' name is attached to it, it better be quality. Yeah, I don't particularly like the phrase, give God your best. But I understand what we mean typically by that. It's a mindset to want to do your best for God. But the truth is, we should all be ready to give God everything. Everything. Whatever He says He wants, that's what He gets. If He leaves it open to us in a situation to give Him whatever, then that's what He gets. If He specifies something, then that's what He gets. Doesn't matter what it is. And I'll base that on two passages, and we won't look at those in depth tonight because they'll get us on a rabbit trail for sure. But Leviticus, if you want to look at this later, look at Leviticus 27, 32 and following to the end of the chapter there, and also 1 Samuel 15. I think both of those passages teach that right there. God gets what He demands. If it's everything, it's everything. If it's not, it's not. Period. You got Colossians 3, drop down to 23 and 24.
Whatever you do, do it heartily as the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you receive the reward of inheritance, or if you serve the Lord, or if you serve the Lord Christ.
You know, I think if we can get this passage right here right as Christians, we pretty much got this thing licked. If I can remember when I'm driving that bus tomorrow morning, not just taking care of those kids and getting them to school, fulfilling my obligations to the Board of Education, I'm serving the Lord. When I talk to the kids, I talk to them in a way that would make Him happy, regardless of whether it makes them happy or not. It'll make Him happy, right? When I talk to the teacher at the front door, when the kids get off, I do it in a way that's going to make him happy, that's going to have some positive influence on her. It goes back to that reputation thing, right? Or him. Could be him. It's all for God. It's all for Jesus. Number 7. As a good board member, you accept fiduciary, I have a hard time saying that word, but y'all know, I hope y'all know what I'm trying to say, financial responsibility, and you're a thoughtful steward of the funds. Now, that word that I struggle with saying there, it just means it's a person to whom property or power is entrusted for the benefit of another. A steward may be a good way to look at it. Somebody, you've been given something that doesn't belong to you to take care of. That's us, right? As Christians. Remember what our number one mission is? Teach the gospel. We've been given the gospel. But what are we doing with it? Are we responsible for the Lord's money? Not a trick question, really. Might turn into a trick question, but yeah, we are, aren't we? We're responsible for what we term the Lord's money. I mean, it's all His. But what we give back to Him, or maybe look at it this way, what we've been blessed with. As Christians, what we've been blessed with belongs to Him, whether it's money or anything else, but particularly right now, money. Somebody read Luke 6:30. Luke 6:30.
Give to every man that asketh of thee, and on him that offereth away the good, ask thee not again.
Give to everyone who asks of you after you interrogate them thoroughly, check their references, because you know they might not use it right. Is that what it said? But it's the Lord's money, I got to be responsible with it, right? That dude might go buy crack with it. You know, ultimately, that's not my problem, is it? Now, I'm not saying we just willy-nilly, everybody that shows up asking for money, we just, here's the safe, help yourself. Not saying that either. And I don't think that's what the Lord said. But I don't think that He expects us to be the FBI and investigate it to the nth degree. There comes a point where you just can't know, right? Or maybe somebody comes, I've had this happen before, y'all may have too. You'd be pulled up at a drive-thru, getting your breakfast or something. Somebody comes up to, hey, can I have some money for food? Well, you know what? They just opened the door for you to kind of be sure that they got their food, right? You don't have to hand them a $20 bill. Get them a number one off of Jack's menu. They ask for money for food. Get them some food. It's hard to take that Big Jack and get cracked with it, I think. I've never tried, but I would imagine it's kind of difficult, right? You know, see, the Lord didn't give us all these, you know, you got to go down and check the list and make sure everything's in order before we give them what they ask for. To a degree, yeah, sure, we'd be responsible the best we can, but then there's going to reach a point where you just got to do what you're told, right? I mean, that's the way I see it anyway. I may be way off base. Randy's getting ready with that rail I talked about earlier. Run me out. But I mean, we need to have, the very next verse after that says, treat others the way you want them to treat you. What if that was you? What if you're the one walking up to somebody in the drive-thru saying, I need something to eat. Can you give me some money? What would you want them to do?
Tell you what, when everybody's at 6:30, people, you know, come by and ask for things.
Oh, yeah.
And so we made a policy that anybody that comes and wants something or other, so this guy come by one night, he wanted an alternator for his car. He couldn't, you know, he said he couldn't get home or nothing about it. So we agreed to go to the parts place with him and get a part. Well, he never showed up. We went up there and he never showed up. So we know what he was doing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you took reasonable action to try to verify that he was actually doing what he said he was doing. Now, what if you didn't have time? What if you didn't have time to go to the parts store? Or just whatever. Yeah, I understand. But what if you're busy? I mean, my bus route's real strict. I'll just keep using it because it's the closest thing to a real job that I've got right now. Okay, I got to be on the bus and leaving the house at 6:15, 6:20 every morning. Got to be at the start of the route at 6:45. All right. Let's assume I don't live out in the middle of the boonies. I live in town where people are around. At 6:10. I'm going down my checklist, because I don't know if y'all ever drove a bus or not, but man, they got a long list of stuff we're supposed to check off every morning to make sure the bus is ready. Don't you tell them, mate. One of my mechanics over. You check off, make sure the lights work, the brakes work, you know, all the important stuff. I'm going down that list. Crackhead XYZ walks up. I need some money for an alternator. I ain't got time to go down to AutoZone with him. Man, I got to leave in 5 minutes. Maybe there's some other solution other than just hand him $50 or whatever, you know, for that problem. But maybe there's not. And what I'm trying to get to is there needs to be, we need to do all we can do to find a compassionate answer to the request. And if it happens to be, here's $50, Lord, I hope he uses it for the right thing. I've done what I was told. Jesus said to give to those who ask. I've done that. Now, and I was in a situation where I couldn't, maybe this isn't a great example, but I was in a situation where I couldn't go further. I understand what you're talking about though, Mr. Bobby, because I mean, that's a good policy. Go ahead.
You know, if you give him $50 and he spends it on dope, then you can help somebody else over here.
Well, that's true.
$50. Is that right?
Well, I don't know. So I guess that's what I'm saying. It's not the outcome I would want, no. But it might be, I might have gone as far with it as I can go. How far do I have to go before I've gone far enough? Because if you go, okay, let's just go with the alternator. You go to the parts store, he shows up, you get the alternator, okay, he takes it. There you go, okay, now you're going to put it on. All right, it's on. He drives away. Drives around the corner, you're going back to 6th Avenue or wherever, He pulls it off, takes it back to the parts store, cashes in, got his $50, and he's gone to buy crack with it. Where does that put you?
I think we got to satisfy the Lord in it.
That's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. You go to the point that you can go, really, where you can go. Don't just willy-nilly just throw money everywhere. I'm not saying that at all. But be compassionate about it. Put yourself in their shoes. What if you were in need? What if you were a crackhead and in that situation? What would you want them to do for you? Help you get your crack? Or use some of that noodle that God gave you to figure out a way to help you? Right? I guess that's where I'm trying to go with this. Is sometimes the answer is just give them the money. There's nothing you can do about it. They're so good at their con game that you can't figure out whether it's right or not. You've done what God told you to do at that point, is what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Okay.
You know, it's a hard situation. There's so many dope kids out there. It's just hard to. If there's 10 of them come up to you and ask you for help, how you going?
I understand, and I don't like that. I'll be honest with you. I don't like that answer. I would prefer. I need your Social Security number. I need your driver's license. I'm gonna run it through my little background check stuff that I got here on my computer, and I'm gonna see if you're legit. And then we're gonna go down to the sheriff's office and we're gonna double check. And then, whatever the next step would be. I prefer that, personally. But the Lord didn't tell me to do all that. It's what I'm saying. I think in some ways, in this situation, in that kind of situation, the Lord has given us an out. Okay? He understands we've got limitations of what we can know. Because some people are good at this game, aren't they? Real good. I mean, they go all over the country to play in this game. What responsibility is it for me, though, to catch? There was a guy, I remember a preacher told his name was Romeo something, and it stuck in my head because his name was Romeo. But that's what he did. He had gone all to churches of Christ all over the country getting baptized to get money out of them.
There used to be a lawyer sitting on the sidewalk. He'd make $100,000 a year sitting on the sidewalk asking for money.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I remember when I lived in Memphis, there was an old guy that I offered, he wanted to work. He caught me one day, and he said he'd work for money. And I said, well, okay, I got some work for you. Back then I had a little place, lots of trees, lots of leaves. That's what I had in mind, because I hate raking leaves. I can't do that kind of work. And dude was dressed nicer than I was. I had a business outfit, but he was dressed nice. He was playing a game. I don't think we're under any responsibility to give him anything when he asks for it, because obviously he's not playing fair. But what if I couldn't tell that? Jesus said, "Give to those that ask." I did the best I could do, and I guess that's just where I'm going. We don't need to be so hard that people say, "Well, I can't go to them for anything," because really I want them to come back to me not for $50 for crack, but for the gospel eventually. It is the end game of it, right?
I think we need to, if we help somebody like that, we need to give them a good prayer whenever you give it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, do all we can do. Okay, let me get back on track here. Okay, of course, this idea applies not just with money. And I kind of touched on this. The most valuable thing that we have is the gospel. Are we giving that out freely? Do we share it with people? We might think, well, people just don't want to hear it. And that's becoming more and more the case. But if they did care to hear it, am I the person they'd come to ask for it? Or would they go to somebody else? Maybe some denominational guy down the road. Maybe because we help that one person, that help plants a seed, so to speak, to bring them back for what's really important. Okay, this one goes back to kind of attendance. If you're a board member, a good board member, you're going to attend the special activities. Annual meetings, special events, retreats, those kind of things. In our case as Christians, that'd be like gospel meetings, door knockings, fellowship meals. You know, the New Testament, particularly the book of Acts, talks a lot about fellowship. A lot about it. You think it's important? The first century Christians met daily. I wonder why. One thing that does, and I don't know if this is the reason why they did it or not, but one thing that meeting together and eating together particularly does is builds a bond. Builds a bond of unity. And I reference Acts chapter 2, the latter portion of the chapter, for that. As a good board member, you got passion and commitment for the organization. Mark 12:30 says, "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. This is the first commandment." If you love the Lord, you must love His church. They're interchangeable. Ephesians 1:22 and 23. I just saw a video popped up on TikTok recently that I was going through, and this guy, I don't know what his religious background was. He's not a member of the church, because he was talking about Southern Baptist and Church of Christ, and about how both of us think we're the only ones going to heaven, and both of us are wrong because Jesus didn't talk about the church. He talked about Him.
Like, what? I tell me today, he said, Church of Christ says that only one's going to go to heaven is Church of Christ. I said, no. I said, everybody that does what the Bible says is going to.
That's right. That's right. And well, we won't go down that rabbit, but you're exactly right. I mean, the Bible teaches that He's the Savior of the body. The body is the church. Now, the problem is with that is people outside the church don't understand what we mean when we say the church. It's a completely different idea in their head. Revelation 2:4 says, "Nevertheless, I have this against you, that you have left your first love." And I just had a note here, the first love thing here doesn't mean necessarily, it's not necessarily a chronological type thing, like as the first love that you had, but it means the thing of most importance. Do we leave the thing? Are we passionate about the thing that's most important? Are you eager to talk about the church in a good way, or about Christ? You caught that, didn't you? You know, I use this in other lessons a lot of times. It's easy to tell what's important to people, isn't it? You talk to them for just a few minutes, you can figure out the things. Well, you figure out they're an Alabama Auburn fan or something like Georgia, which is or or what, right? Doesn't take long. You talk to them because it's the things they talk about. That's one of the ways to know what's important to them. What do they talk about? What do they spend their money on? And what do they spend their time on? I think if you look at those three things in anybody, you're going to come pretty close to what's really important to that person. All right, next thing, publicly advocates for the organization. Do I stand up for Christ no matter what? And what kind of activities do I participate in? What do people see me doing? Is it something that would honor the church or bring disgrace on the church or question? Am I a Christian 24/7 or only on Sunday mornings? Number 11, we're almost done. Identifies men and women for gifts and board membership. Okay, this one doesn't, maybe not quite as much of an application to us as Christians, but maybe in this sense. Am I looking for people who listen to the gospel? Am I looking for members who aren't contributing or participating to their ability? And you might say, well, wait a minute, that's the elder's job. Somebody get Galatians 6:1. Or I'll tell you what, I'll read it to you. Galatians 6:1 says, "Elders, if a man is overtaken in any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourselves, lest you also be tempted." Did I read that right? Did I? Elders, if a man is overtaken, it says brethren. That's me. You know, we're looking out for each other, including the elders. We are looking out for them. They're looking out for us. It's our responsibility to be looking out for one another. And part of that, I think, is that to be looking out to one another to make sure we're doing what we need to be doing. You know, I'm going to use my son-in-law again. Alan is a great teacher. He's a great preacher. If he's sitting back and not doing those things, it's my responsibility, not just as his father-in-law, but as his brother, to say, hey, Alan, dude, you're a good teacher. You need to be teaching a class. You need to be stepping up when Mark's not around and they need a preacher. You need to be stepping up and doing that if the elders allow it, and they do. You know, those are the kind of things we need to be doing for one another all the time. Okay. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, encourage one another. The last couple ones are contribute financially to the fullest extent possible. Understand the importance of a mission deficit, and that's just an idea of, are we able to carry out our mission? And there's different aspects of that. Money is part of it, but also people and talents is a part of it too. And last but not least, limit the number of boards that he or she serves on. And Luke 16:13 says, no man can serve two masters. We can only be part of one church, one religious organization. That's it. Okay. I'll just let y'all figure out what your score was if you kept up with that. If it's anything below 49, you need to maybe go back and look at those low scores. Okay. I know I've got a couple of them I need to go back and look at too. Anybody else want to fix anything before we adjourn? Okay, I appreciate y'all's participation, and let's pray and then we'll be dismissed. Father, we thank you for loving us, and thank you for giving us all that we have, and for giving us this time together tonight, especially, Father. I hope that all the things we talked about were pleasing in your sight and that were beneficial to us, that we might be strengthened, Father, and might be encouraged to serve you better. Please be with our loved ones that are hurting and sick, and bless them that they might be well, and they might be comforted. And Father, help us to see opportunities around us to help others and to reach out to those who are lost. And we thank you, Father, for Jesus and for him being willing to give himself for us. And it's in his name we pray. Amen.